Hi Jayanth, good to see you back.
Hi,
Hope you had a
Leslie.
great weekend.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I know this has become a standard question of that, but
And
yeah, I mean a lot has been happening. Uh, but of course, uh, before we get on with our conversation, we have with us today Hrishikesh Kumar, who is the co-founder and CEO of CerebrumEdge. The interestingly, if I put on my journalist hat, this is one of the few or the rare mission statement of a company which I found to be so simple and to the point. Otherwise, most of the mission statements and the introductions of companies will confound you miserably. But in this particular case, this is how I'm quoting from his mission statement. It is estimated that every day approximately 6,400 people die from occupational accidents or diseases, and that 860,000 people are injured on the job. Our mission at Cerebrum Edge is to prevent this. Period. It's just to the point, succinct. I love this. Of course, how he goes about it is exactly what we're going to speak about it, where he uses computer vision and generative AI and enhancing these kind of computer vision models that he has. Uh, welcome, Rishi.
Thanks, Leslie. Thank you for having me. Hello, Jayanth.
hi, Rishi.
So,
And
yeah,
people, what Leslie did not mention in his introduction is Rishi is one of the few go-to guys for both me and Leslie for anything latest and greatest in AI. Okay, he's an AI
Oh, of
researcher.
course.
Yeah, we've known each other for many years now. And anything that's happening, if we want to unravel, if we want to understand, the latest research, Rishi is our go-to guy.
Yeah, and he explains it well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's exactly what I find interesting. And of course, Rishi, before we get into the more about what you do and how the specifics on computer vision and generative AI, we talk about the developments that are shaping the space of AI and generative AI. I have a couple of things in mind, and of course, you and Jayant can take it forward from there. First thing, of course, is that major announcement that we had, basically of Amazon investing up to $4 billion in Anthropic. Now, I found that very interesting on many counts. One is, if you remember, Jim Cramer had coined this term called FAANG.
Yeah.
So we were
yes,
Yeah.
all used to, basically
Bang.
Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google.
Netflix and
It
yeah,
Yeah, then later it included Apple in it, and
Apple.
it made
So
it
FANG, it
FAANG,
becoming FANG.
FAANG.
NG.
Then and today, now the new acronym is MAMA, MAMMA. That's Meta, of course, because Facebook became Meta. Then Meta, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and
Amazon.
Alphabet, of course, because you don't talk about Google. Uh,
Ah,
then there's also another acronym which is called MATANA. So that's Microsoft, Apple, Tesla, Alphabet, Nvidia, and Amazon. Now, my contention was that if you add OpenAI, Anthropic, and Hugging Face to it, then it becomes Matanoa or it becomes Matanoa. So whatever you want to, it depends on how you want to juggle these acronyms,
sure.
of course, or club these companies together. But my limited point was that basically it's not wise to bet on any one company, because you're going to end up in a
Yeah,
serious problem out here. So as this AI race is going on, we're going to have
right.
very different problem, because it's not only OpenAI that invested 4 billion in Anthropic. I think we'll remember. You may recall that even Google had invested something like 300 million in,
300
again, in
million
Anthropic.
for
Yeah,
10%
in
stake. Yeah.
Anthropic. Yeah, and it did
In,
not disclose this openly, but I think that was the figure that everybody had. And of course, both, I think, Amazon and Google, I mean, it gives Anthropic, access to their infrastructure to train and deploy the AI models. Uh, Interestingly, a lot has happened, in this sort of last let's say about 15, 20 days, which are, I think, to a great extent, pretty path breaking. Google announced a series of updates to Bard. That is one
Yes.
thing. Then Meta is working on a generative AI chatbot called Genai Personas. Now, this is a Wall Street Journal article, and Meta has got, I think, the event is starting today or tomorrow, I think. So it's a 2-day event. So they will be making a lot of announcements. And of course, Microsoft has announced its plan to embed its generative AI assistant called Copilot across many of its products.
Yeah.
I think there's a, so this clearly shows that there's so much activity out here. It doesn't give you time to even digest the facts.
Yeah.
So, of course, this
That's
is
that's very
something
true,
that
Leslie.
I thought of. Uh, I mean, I would love to hear your thoughts on, you have been, Rishi, you have been tracking this space for who knows now, more than a decade, very easily. Of course, we used to call it AI, AI
Yeah.
1.0, as Jayanth and me like to refer to that. And then, of course, now it's AI 2.0 or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So,
So some quick my thought about these developments. So one is the speed of innovation, or speed of the releases of these information. It's very difficult to catch up for a human being. I remember, like, till almost 4 or 5 years back, I used to have some kind of a weekly 1 hour slot where I used to just go through some of those papers, and one or two I used to go to in details. If something is really, really interesting, then once in a month I used to try and replicate that paper, right? So now, this is simply not feasible for somebody to individually do that. Across all those acronyms and the companies, I know at least one clear winner, and that is Nvidia, right? Just because they are selling all the GPUs. So whether it's Anthropic, whether it's OpenAI, or whoever is doing that, whoever is the final winner, Nvidia is sure shot is going to be the number one, or at least partnered with the final winner. So that's very clear. The second thing about all of that is, some of these big companies, they are realizing that it might be something similar to search engine, but at a huge scale. So there could be, say, one or two winner, but the scale could be, many x exponentially higher than the search engine business. And that's why you see all these quick, big, huge billion-dollar investment by Meta, by Amazon, by Tesla. So who are, they're not supposed to be in this field, but everybody is thinking that they might, leave behind. So they have to get there. Now the interesting thing would be, to know, like, how this whole things play out, whether we get new innovation or we are just kind of replicating whatever is happening. Because OpenAI was kind of a, big announcement where it took and it kind of captured the imagination of the people, especially with the 3.5 release onwards. Though, as I mean, we know each other for so long, we know, like, it's not, sudden development. There has been multiple phases, steps by step, how it reached. But with 3 and 3.5, it has captured the imagination of the normal world, the business people, the CEOs, the normal AI practitioners, the students, everyone. So it would be, it's exciting time to be, particularly with the AI field. Yeah, go ahead, Jayanth.
It's it's interesting when trillion-dollar companies go through FOMO. Startups get billions invested in them, right? And it's a circular investment, mind you. I mean, Amazon announced $1.25 billion, and another 2.75, probably going all the way up to cumulatively 4 billion. But most of that is being flowed back into Amazon for usage of AWS clouds and the compute, and the compute servers, right? But like Rishi talked about, Tesla is getting in, although Tesla conventionally is not supposed to be an AI company or working on AI as a part of its core proposition. But like he said, it's a trillion-dollar company going through FOMO, and they are now looking for potential partners. And it's very interesting what you mentioned, Leslie, that both Google and Amazon, invested in Anthropic. Okay. Rishi, I
Yeah.
would like to
You
take
know,
this.
that's
Go on.
just before you get on to Rishi specifically, there are certain aspects that I want to talk about. One is, of course, you mentioned the FOMO factor.
Yeah.
Now, McKinsey came out with another acronym called FOBO. Do you know what it is?
Fear of
Fear of
fear
being obsolete.
being obsolete. Yeah. Okay. Fear of
And
being
this was
obsolete.
actually, yeah, actually in specific reference to the Gen Z and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
so because I
generation
mean
AI, like Debjani called. Yeah.
yeah, because the accelerated pace at which these developments are taking place, it sort of could confound anybody. I don't. There's no clear direction as to where it is going.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even what Rishi said about Nvidia, I know I myself have been pretty bullish about Nvidia in the sense I have written a very detailed article on why Nvidia is the hottest thing. But even having said that, I think the listeners also ought to know this, that Nvidia is a fabless company. It does not make its own chips. Whereas, so it gets its chips done from either TSMC, which is the Taiwan semiconductor company, and or it's Samsung. So mostly TSMC. But now, given the geopolitics, TSMC also has moved a plant to Arizona. But there is quite something because Apple is trying to make its own chips. Google already has its TPUs, which are the tensor processing units. Then Intel and AMD, I don't think it's. I mean, clearly they're lagging in this race. But when you start combining CPUs and GPUs, which is because I mean, Rishi will obviously know that because he uses it on a daily basis. The GPUs are power hogging, but
Yeah.
and they're very expensive also. Whereas CPUs, that that traditional battle between whether CPU is more effective or GPU is, because it does parallel computing, is more effective. We have heard the stories, but that I think would be out of the scope of this particular podcast. But I'm just saying that there are competitors on the horizon, and these equations will change. And of course, I must clarify to our listeners that Rishi is part of the NVIDIA Inception program. So
Yes.
there could be some bias. I know he's not biased, but that boilerplate disclaimer is a must out here. Uh, uh, Jayanth,
And
you have been.
talking about semiconductor companies, one of the key development in the last week, ARM got relisted, went back to an IPO with $65 billion valuation, almost double of what SoftBank bought it a few years back, right? And ARM
Please
also
don't speak
is getting
about.
back into
I'm saying please don't speak about valuation, because now I think OpenAI is talking about $80 to $90 billion
right,
valuation.
90
right,
billion. Yeah.
90 billion, yeah,
Yeah, I mean it's mind-boggling, these kind
yeah.
of
Crazy one. Yeah.
numbers. And
But
OpenAI also recently said that ChatGPT can now see, hear, and speak. If you remember, they just put
they
out that.
released the Visual
Oh,
GPT notes
yes,
yesterday.
the
Yeah,
visual.
yesterday.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
that's
So
another, and that happened a few hours after
the Anthropic
this
investment,
thing.
Anthropic
Yes. So,
investment.
I think they're trying to outdo each other. They keep eavesdropping on each other's conversation and try to. Now, everybody knows that Meta is going to make these announcements, so trying to steal the show. It's a fun kind of exercise that's happening out there. But yeah,
Yeah. So in
One quick
fact,
comment about the
yeah,
circular investment which Jayanth made. So the estimate is like when the startups are getting say $1 billion investment, the 40% of those investments are getting into those server cost, cloud server cost, right?
40%.
So yeah, almost 40% of those startups, those that investment is going back to either Amazon and to Nvidia and to whoever is providing those servers. Uh, yeah, so I just wanted to make sure that we understand this part. The other thing is, since I'm part of NVIDIA Inception program, we are also part of Microsoft Startup program. And when we started a few years back, $100,000 cloud credit, that used to be a huge thing, right? So that used to take care of most of the, decent models which you could build or, try and iterate. But now that is simply not sufficient. Even simple 7 billion Falcon model, you cannot try with
Parameter
that
calculation.
kind of the cost is going to be huge. So and that's where it relates to some of the conversation which you had in your previous podcast with NASCOM head, and it's a very relevant one, that it's not the small investment which any startup or the investor can make and do some meaningful work.
Jayanth, I know you're itching to ask Rishi some pointed questions, but since Rishi mentioned Falcon model, I know for the listeners we have to mention that this is the United Arab Emirates Falcon OpenAI, I mean open source
Open source.
sort of language model,
Large language models, yeah.
LLM, which is making a lot of. Of course, there's a 180 billion parameter one also, which is making headlines. But I think the interesting part is Jan LeCun, who is the chief scientist at Meta. He put out, and he's of course one of the godfathers of modern AI, also the deep learning part of it, along with Jeffrey Hinton and others. Now, the interesting part is he put out a tweet, or should we call it a post? Now, because it's become
On
X
X.
now.
Post on
Yes,
X.
see this. I have to get used to this X and post and tweet and repost. Anyway, that's Musk has made our life a little more complex. But so Jan LeCun yesterday posted saying that, dear journalists, okay, whenever you talk about parameters, okay, the models are not trained on parameters, they're trained on tokens, they're trained on
Yeah.
words. So he's saying
Trained
this
on
Yeah,
comparison of
difference between
180 billion
parameters and tokens.
and tokens.
exactly. And
Exactly.
and we have been, and Jayanth, you remember we have been talking about this for quite some time. It's like,
Exactly.
you're trained on these tokens, you're not trained on parameters. So
Parameters.
parameters, yes, 175 billion parameters, or 1.8 trillion, or 1 trillion, or whatever GPT-4 is, and whatever the other LLMs are, probably doesn't make so much of a difference. It's the data sets that make a difference. But Rishi, I would love your thoughts on this, because you are the guy who actually uses this in real. So it's as a practitioner, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, all these models. So, Leslie, as I was trying to tell earlier, now it's actually very difficult to compare these models on the useful task. So there are benchmarks. There are benchmarks, and whenever these models are getting published, they give their result and try to show that okay, they are better here, better there, etc. But beyond the set benchmark, I would like to know them how they behave on the set which is different from those benchmarks, because we don't know whether those benchmarks were also used during validation and testing phases. That's number one. Second thing, what right now my interest would be is the computational cost. So if something is really useful happening with less computation, I would be more interested in that. And so there's a lot of discussion going on around whether it's a limit of the LLMA, which right now is using a particular way of training the model, autoregressive way, whether we should redesign that to come up with a better accurate, less hallucinating, giving a thoughtful model, or we have to, right now the whole approach is kind of a brute force, right? So what we are trying to do is using lot of data. Some people are making it the input little bit more refined to get a good result, but still it's like a kind of a brute force model. So beyond this brute force, should we change the underlying approach algorithms, or we have to get more data, maybe synthesize more data, right, and then try to make it a good generic model, or have a lot many different good vertical models for different kind of applications. So that's the debate, and that's which is going on across the industry and also with the AI researchers, and I find that very fascinating.
So big is not necessarily better, as Jan
Better.
LeCun
Yeah,
also
no.
puts it.
Exactly.
And,
Because
this is what I think Jayanth and we have been discussing, for quite some time, that
exactly.
let's not get carried away by the number of
Yeah.
parameters, etc.
And
But
we've
yeah,
discussed the vertical LLMs
vertical.
opportunity also in the past. But Rishi, Leslie, since I have Rishi on this episode, I would like to actually run the theme of anti-hype for this episode. Okay, if there's anyone who can answer questions countering all the hype that we've been seeing and witnessing, probably Rishi is one of those guys. So Rishi, yesterday I was having a conversation with someone at MIT in Boston, a guy who's been in the AI space, and he gave me, we had a long conversation, but in a nutshell, the gist of it was he gave me a very counter point of view. He said that ChatGPT and generative AI, the current avatars of it, you have to view it as nothing but a big giant autocomplete. Okay, they are autocomplete models. They really don't have the intelligence that you think that they
Yes.
have. They're not generating something. And what they have proven is that, I mean, they had the access to the compute power. Okay, so what has been proven with ChatGPT and other Gen AI models currently is that what compute power can do. Like you mentioned earlier, it's brute force, right? And that's why it's Nvidia who's the winner, because compute power, brutally can take this to the next level. But purely from an intelligence point of view, transformers themselves are not really the most intelligent of AI models out there, right? In terms of what they do in terms of intelligence. What is your view on this? I mean, how much of this statement is, would you agree with it, and what's your view on this?
No, I largely agree with that. And for the simple reason
Mm-hmm.
that when most of us as a user, we use ChatGPT or OpenAI, and we complain about few things that
Right.
it's not correct. The references which it is
Hallucinations.
giving is not right, etc. So we have to understand the logic behind that, right? It is doing what it is supposed to do. So it has to make a best fit. So I'm asking it to generate, say, 100 words, it starting with something, some background, and it's trying to fit the best possible 100 words with the knowledge which we have provided them. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
trying to give you most factual information for sure. It's generating, right?
Yeah.
And it's not factual. So we have to understand that part. And that's where the limitation of the chat GPT or similar models have to be, more open, and particularly through the platforms like yours or through, main media channel, we should know the limitations. So one thing which I'm more worried about is it's something kind of a dirty bomb, right? So I use, say,
Right.
API
Right.
of ChatGPT, build something and tell you that it will answer, say, for example, all your health needs, without knowing that whether it's a factual or it's just trying to generate the best possible answer. So those
Yeah.
kind of dangers are, especially for the country like ours, right, where things are not so regulated. It's coming too fast. We are just building on top of the layer model using that. So we have to make sure that we are not into that territory where we are not open about the danger, and how do we understand the output of these models.
Right.
I think
So,
there's another aspect to this. Basically, it is an understanding. So I find people in two camps, because I look at it also from a very different hat, especially when I'm talking to these. So the one camp is people who actually do the programming, who
right.
in whether it is Python, whether it's R, whether it's Rust or whatever it be. Now, whichever programming, these guys are hardcore programmers. They understand. They have been doing training these machine learning models. They understand how algorithms work, and not conceptually. They do it actually in practice. That's
Correct.
one camp. The other camp is the mid camp that understands both sides of the fence, a little of programming, a little
Yeah.
of the theory, and there's the extreme camp that understands neither of it, who just takes away but the whole part of, has watched these sci-fi movies like Terminator or a Universal Soldier or this her
Uh,
HER, that yeah. software and is enamored with those kind of things, is either enamored about it, or like sort of raising these questions whether AI is going to overpower them, or fueled by all the developments that we have. Whether it's moment they hear 1.8 trillion parameters, they go berserk and say, yeah, this is 1.8 trillion parameters, now this is the end of the world. Apocalypse is here, and Nostradamus has given us a new model out here. This also, if you take this an analogy, stretch this analogy a bit, you realize in the old, you have these sometimes in movies where they show these tribals standing over there and start bowing down if they see somebody with a plane on the top, because
Yeah,
they don't understand
yeah.
how planes operate. Now imagine the pilot in the plane sitting over
Gods
there
must
who's
be
just
crazy.
clearly
Gods must
exactly
be
where there's
crazy.
God. Yeah. So yeah, that's a lovely example. So God must be crazy
Yeah.
because see, like, okay, but these guys are in awe of and I don't want to get into the territory of how the God factors, but this particular about anything that you do not understand is always a major puzzle. I think the same thing is happening out here, and I think it's important for people to educate themselves and put in some effort and understand how the program is done, so that it's
Yes.
Yeah.
it's like somebody, a cheap magician trying to cheat you with something. So there are some real good aspects about things, like look at Rishi. It would be lovely in this particular context to talk about
Context. Yeah.
your own experience with computer
Yeah.
vision,
Your own
and
journey.
how
Yeah.
how generative AI is enhancing computer vision. That would be lovely for the listeners, so that they can make a connection to actually what's happening out here.
Sure, sure, Sukhan. So both Leslie and probably Jayanth, they have kind of witnessed last so many years how we try to build step by step, one thing at a time, failed many times, iterated, come up with a few things. So my interest actually started around 2011. So I was working mostly on the forecasting aspect of very structured kind of data, and that time itself there was these things were coming up, all those models, new models were coming up. uh, Jan and other researchers, they had uh, their papers which came out. Also, if you think, the one thing which has happened, and which some of us underestimate, particularly in the context of India, is the courses in Coursera and the courses in YouTube. So what happens is, you have access to all these good guys, all these researchers across the world, coming up and sharing the knowledge. So one thing which has happened in AI world particularly is that people have collaborated and shared lot of knowledge, lot of models, and lot of the data. So it became little bit easier to get and experiment. So around 2011-12, I really wanted to see how, what we can do with the unstructured data, with the text and with the vision, with other things. So we had to pick one field, and I picked vision field for the simple reason, because it seemed really challenging at that point of time, that how do I get information out of the pixels, plain pixels. And I we went around, tried to configure basic GPU server, which we are still using there in our offices. So that's where, like, the technology part came apart, with the knowledge from everywhere in the world, people sharing their information, their new algorithms, new data. And also there used to be some competitions, open competitions, where you can simply participate and submit your model, see where you are on the leaderboard, can you do something better. And once those competitions used to get over, the winners used to share their algos. And for a person like me, it was like huge, right, to understand where we missed out and what are the new insights which you could take up with this. So the computation power came up with slightly affordable, it was not very affordable, but still slightly affordable GPU cards, graphics card, the information and the knowledge sharing which was happening. And then you had to pick a field. Okay, I have taken this field, now how do I get, like, what kind of use cases I can build. So as you know, Leslie, and both Jan, like, we experimented with multiple things around. So our first thing was the basic thing which you get is, can I become a horizontal AI company, right? And you know how difficult it is. So very soon we realized that it was not feasible for us, particularly with the kind of resources which we had, to experiment and build a horizontal AI company. So at best, what we could do is we can build a solution for a particular segment, for a particular business, and then use this as a kind of a underlying intelligence level. So solve a problem which I really believe in, which we are passionate about, but accelerate the whole problem solving with the new computer vision models, new deep learning models, and then experiment on top of that. So that's how we started, and we went through multiple phases. Initially tried picking whatever was coming, the use cases, and then we tried to narrow ourselves to a particular aspect, just solving one small problem, though it's not small problem, it's a huge problem which we are trying to solve. Occupational health and musculoskeletal disorder which we work in. Once you get in, you realize how huge, how big, and this problem is. So,
But Rishi,
yeah.
in brief, can you just expand a little on this particular aspect? Because I know that you use computer vision and machine learning models, to convert a raw video into ergonomic insights. Now, what exactly do you mean when you say that?
Yeah, sure. So, I'll give you some data. Okay. So many people will not know that the biggest segment of injury which happens across the industry is in the group which is called musculoskeletal disorder, MSDs, right? So basically all your neck spasm, back pain, wrist issues, etc. So they comes around almost 40%. So this 40% data comes up from the compensation claims, actually, which the compensation claim which people get out of US, and even European data, European surveys are on the same benchmark. In India, we don't have this kind of a data because this data is simply not getting captured at the right level. So we know the problem. Now, what is happening because of this problem? Because of this problem, what is happening is the critical workers are getting injured really fast, and you are keeping a bench. The whole assembly line is stopping because somebody is simply not able to move his back, her back, uh, because of the issue. And then you go and call somebody, occupational doctor, who comes and gives you some kind of a pain reliever or something. So this is the issue which used to come there. Then what happened is, researchers, when they got into that, both from industry point of view and from medical point of view, that how do we solve this issue. So one way of solving this issue was to trying to estimate the factors which is causing this issue. So there are factors like the way our postures, all the body joints which is moving into a particular way across the work which we do, how fast or how slow we are doing our work, and environmental variables. Beyond this, there are also psychosocial aspect of this, at what psychological state my mind is, based on that my work and risk of injury also increases or decreases. So these are the common factors, right? So what happens is, there are very few experts, if you call them, who can do this analysis on the scale. So some companies, since so there are two things which is happening, right? So there are two drivers. One is the cost driver, of course. So wherever the healthcare cost is really high, so people want to reduce this injury. The other is the social consciousness, or just becoming a good company to work with, right? So I want to make sure that my employees are not getting injured. So this is another driver where we talk about the whole ESG field, sustainability, ESG and sustainability. So these are the drivers. Now, how do we solve this problem? The one way of solving this problem is that we keep training more and more people. But then, even with those people, there comes subjectivity. There is no kind of you don't have some kind of a data to look into in the future. So last year I did the risk assessment, and I don't know what has happened this year. So there is no correlation between the risk which has been identified and the injury which has happened. And when we started working with, and I came across this problem thanks to you and Jayanth, actually, Leslie. So if you remember, we were doing something else, and that was out of
But we
fun.
didn't get the royalty.
Royalty.
And yeah, it's an interesting story, and probably Jan can also add it here. So it was just a fun project which Jayanth wanted to see how do we capture the biomechanics for an athlete who is getting trained. How do
Yeah.
we have some kind of a quantifiable information? And we started looking into that part first, came up with some crude output, and the first thing which happened is Jayanth got really excited. Let's do something. Let's come up
Yeah,
with something.
but he had vested interest because his
I
daughter
had
is a
vested
national level
interest.
badminton player.
Yeah. So for the listeners, if I may just butt in and give some context, it was exactly 5 years ago. It was one September evening, 2018. It was a Sunday night. Rishi came home for dinner, and we started discussing. And for the listeners, knowledge, my daughter is a badminton player. She's 14 years old. So 5 years ago, she was 9. Okay, and she wants to become a professional athlete. So at that point of time, during dinner, I'm always, as a dad, I'm always thinking of giving her some undue advantage, right? So, and I thought I have access to, technology and people like Rishi who are always at the cutting edge of emerging technologies. How can I, use any of these technologies coming up? So I put this problem in front of Rishi on a Sunday night, and we started discussing the problem till about 11 o'clock. And by Tuesday, 1.5 day later, he sent me the first version of how they could solve it using computer vision. Okay, the biomechanics, and that evolved into a POC on which we had 2 patents actually, where purely basis of phone camera. Okay, the model that CerebrumEdge had developed can capture the movement of the athlete on the court, and forecast potential injuries and the best playing positions and even calorie count. It started from there, and 5 years later, it evolved into a completely different, product which CerebrumEdge has taken around the world right now.
Yeah. So I will quickly complete it because Leslie
Yeah.
should not feel left out. So what happened was we built that biomechanics aspect of that. So our goal was two things, right? So one is the movement of the athlete and capture the reach of the athlete. That's really important in racket sports, right? The other thing is like when you are doing a kind of a shot, when you are hitting a smash, whether you are generating the right kind of force behind that. So that's how we started that, and then Leslie, if you remember, like we were introduced and we presented this in Mint conference in 2018.
Yes, at the MTech
Yes,
conference, which was with
yes,
MIT.
and
Correct.
somebody took a video and sent it to some of the people in the industry. One of the big organization in India, manufacturing company, they contacted us and asked us, can we do something on similar line for their workers? Now, this is a strange thing. Normally, we think that safety or health is kind of afterthought, particularly for the Indian companies. That's the mindset, and by and large, it's true also because of so many other regions which it's not relevant here. But that particular company, they wanted to take this biomechanics for athlete and extrapolate this for their workers. So
On the
then
shop
we
floor.
yes, and then we spent like a week into their assembly lines, trying to understand, taking talking to those people, talking to those workers, and see if whatever we are estimating through our models, whether that correlates with what they go through. And most interesting insight of that 1 week was like what the model output was when we had this probability of risk, and when we talked to those people, those workers already knew that workstation, that is really tough. So when we after the work, when we go back, we feel the pain. So that was known, but there is no way of to quantify that data. So that's how we started seeing that okay, there is an opportunity. there is something which we can build, and that could be helpful. So, just reducing the pain. I have my own back pain issue, actually lower back pain. Though I'm not sure whether it's because of the bad ergonomics or Bangalore roads
No,
or
it could be bad karma also, because many of us are.
No royalty. No royalty.
See, yeah, absolutely. You have to learn to explain it in many other ways.
yes, yeah,
But having said that, Rishi, I in the interest of time, I also want you to explain to our listeners how generative AI is enhancing these things. If you're using generative AI, and how it is enhancing.
Yeah, what's the role of generative
so
AI?
so some part of this we are using. So once you start thinking about building a model, first thing which you need is the data, right? So how do you get the data? So you need industrial partners to give you the data. They also have lot of restrictions. People don't want to share the data, right? So one thing which we did was, apart from the partnership where we got some sort of industrial data, we tried to generate the data. And there were two things which helped us a lot. One is the game. So video games where people are in the industrial setting. So some of that data which was already annotated. So that was really helpful for us. The second thing which we started doing was lot of slicing and dicing of the data to create a kind of a set where we think that okay, now this particular aspect is not getting captured, can we do some kind of improvement? And that was a long iterative process. So in one shot we did not get it. We went through the multiple iterations with different organizations, and with lot of support of many companies, for sure, our partners who helped us with the data, who helped us with validation. It went through the from single image to video in the lab setting to industrial setting.
Rishi, I know that, I mean, again, since we are running out of time, and before I end the conversation, I would love to ask you one question, which I think even Jayanth would be very keen on knowing, is that, typically, in fact, actually, when we were talking to Devjani on this same podcast, about funding for deep tech companies, she said that yes, this is a very big issue. We both Jayanth and me, we know that you have faced a lot of problems as far as funding is concerned. Why is it so? Is it that the VC community does not understand enough of these new technologies? They're not willing to put their money behind these kind of projects? They feel that something else might come up. What exactly is the thinking? I mean,
yeah, because 2 weeks back, Rishi, when we spoke to Devjani, she advocated very strongly for patient capital. Okay, and you've had a journey. I mean, you are a deep tech, company coming from AI research and evolving into a product company. And talk us through your journey of raising funds. Okay, and how has been your journey?
And what more can be done?
Sure. So actually, before I start talking about this aspect, it's a kind of a disclaimer that is the personal experience, right? So no two startups are same, no two founders are same. So people might have very different experience with the investor community or with their own company also. This is just a personal anecdote, and I'll not try to generalize it too much. Yes, because I still have to work with the community, right? So if you remember, like 4 or 5 years back, when I used to talk to some of these, so there are two kind of investors in India, right? So one is at least India-centric investor who are not having presence other than India, maybe in Singapore, maybe in Dubai, but not beyond that. Then there are other set of investors who are like, say, US investors who have an Indian presence. So these two are separate. I would like to separate them into two different classes. So what happened initially was, like, people were not sure about the use cases of AI. Okay, so one common theme across the discussion was like, what is the market size? Tell me the TAM. And that was like, I really don't believe in the TAM for multiple reasons. I really get agitated about TAM part.
Spoke like a true entrepreneur.
For two reasons. One, As a startup, when I'm trying to solve a problem, if you ask me TAM, maybe I'll come up with some numbers. Some market research people who are doing that for money, they have their own interest, they come up with a few $1 billion. But if I'm smart enough and I know that I have broken into something which is really fine and there is not much scope to grow, as a founder, I always can expand my TAM. So once so with the startup, my personal experience and my personal advice would be to solve one problem better than anyone else. One small problem. If you are able to do that, then there is always scope to expand the time and other things. Now we have seen in Indian startups, seen what has happened with all those big TAM companies. What is happening? It's not that they are not they have not tried, but it becomes really difficult. So some of those investors who are very experienced, and they also had probably whatever their experience was, we should not blame them, but their focus was, okay, what is the market size which we can capture? So that was the thing which was coming up. The second thing which people really focused on is, okay, what is the equivalent one? So for example, I am Uber of something, right? I am Tesla of something. So this was a craze sometimes back. So you always have to be copycat of somebody before people think that, okay, it's a viable business. And that's where, like, we need investors who are a little bit more innovative. There are a few. It's not like there are not. There are a few who takes bet on startups, and at least from startup from IIT Madras, they were funded by some of the company which is like, this is a moonshot companies, but somebody is taking a bet, and there would be IP, there would be technology, there would be knowledge which will come out of that, at least, even if they are not successful into their grand vision. So there are a few things where people were really conservative. They wanted to follow what is already happened somewhere and then do that. And then it was very difficult for them to also understand that how the AI part, particularly the part which we were doing, the vision part of the AI, how that will expand into a big sustainable business. So probably some blame to people like us also, who were not able to convince those investors in a right way. But as a founder, you have to take a choice. So you have limited time, you have limited energy, whether you should focus on the investors, whether you should focus on your consumers, right, the clients. And probably we took a decision that we still talk to some of the investors sometimes, but we say no to many people, and we say that, okay, let's focus our energy, our limited energy, to get the product where we are solving some of the issues, and the client is happy. So that's the focus which we tried taking up for many years now.
No, I'm glad you brought up this point, because I think to be fair, we have to tell our listeners also that a lot of, practically every IIT has all IITs have these deep tech incubation centers and startup incubation centers.
Incubators.
So I think it's important. Like IIT Bombay has the innovation cell, so has IIT Madras, IIT Delhi, and these are like known. Some of the best of entrepreneurs have come up from these things. But I think the reference was more to the hardcore, deep tech companies like yours, where probably the technologies are unknown. Like I think in the West, it's easier. In Silicon Valley, it's easier to get patient capital because they understand the ecosystems. Perhaps in India, we are more used to e-commerce companies, more used to other kind of companies. And as you said, I think you brought up this very important point of the TAM factor. I wonder if Sam Altman was asked, what's the TAM? It would have been very difficult for
application
him
of generating 100 tokens.
Yeah. No, I mean,
exactly.
there is a video where Sam Altman went on record saying that we still don't know how to make money, right? I mean, in India, the investment ecosystem is more on the apps and the scalability, versus the technology innovation. But that's changing, to Rishi's point.
Yeah, Jayanth, and you have helped many companies get investments, so you should know about this particular.
Yeah, that ecosystem.
No, but I think it's No, I'm sure that as you said, I think on this positive note that the ecosystem is changing. I'm sure a lot of more cerebrums will come up, and I love this word cerebrum. First, was it cerebrum first, and then you added the edge to it.
Yeah, because we were looking for domains at that point of time, and Cerebrum was simply not available. So see, again, the cerebrum came out of neural network, right? So all the neural network, inspired with the brain, and we were looking for some some word related to brain, and that's how cerebrum, and then edge, an advantage of brain. That's how we came up with the name.
So, Rishi, great. We had a real nice cerebral talk over here,
Yeah.
and you gave us real good insights on it. And uh, thank you very much for being here, and wish you the best with all your future investments. And of course, we'll be talking more. And I don't think this is the last. We will surely have you on the the other upcoming podcast whenever you make some other, what would you say, path breaking innovations.
No, I mean the way the big $1 trillion companies are opening up, and we might have him only to help us and the audience understand, unravel, make sense of all these new releases every other week. Yeah.
Absolutely, never know for some workshop or something. So good. Hope you guys have a
Thank you so
great
much.
weekend.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Rishi. Thanks,
Thank
Leslie.
you. Thanks, Jayanth. Thanks.
Take care. Bye.